Okay, so this is just a quick overview of hole recognition available to everybody in the cab in Fusion 360. So just as a kind of a reminder to turn on hole recognition, first thing you want to go here to View and select Show Text Commands. In the text command window, make sure that you're on text here and you can type in cam.f or cam.feature_flags. That will bring up the feature flags dialog. What we're looking for is this drill wizard, so just make sure that drill wizard is checked and then go ahead and close that. So hole recognition currently lives under the drilling dropdown right here as hole recognition. So I'll just kind of walk through the process of using hole recognition, kind of what you can and can't do at least today. So in this part, I've got a single setup. Basically, all I'm looking to do is recognize all of the holes on this top side of the part here. Notice that there are several different sized holes, and this is really where hole recognition comes in super handy. So in this dialog, I can sort by any one of these columns. And I've also got some that are turned off by default, so I can show elevation and azimuth or align setup. This data errors is an internal thing that we have been using to determine what's being recognized. So it's going to be just some kind of strange information, but feel free to turn it on if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on this aligned setups, and then just click on the heading here for align setups. Note you can also adjust where these columns are, so maybe if you wanted to have the aligned setups at the beginning, you could do so. All right, so a little bit more about this dialog. You can multi-select in here, and there is a right-click menu that allows you to select basically kind of two things, simple drill or ignore, and I'll explain what these kind of are in just a second. Aside from that, of course, we could explode selected hole groups. So one of the big things, let me stick this back over here. One of the big things about this dialog is, so let's say this whole group right here, we've recognized that there are 9 different holes here. In this case, they're on the back side, which is why I'm going to ignore them. But 9 different holes that contain 2 segments. So what I mean by that is there are 2 essentially cylinders. So you can see the one cylinder here and then the kind of taper down there at the bottom. So those are 2 segments. Whereas this one is just a single segment here, okay? And in this case, just a single hole. But we could go in and explode that selected hole group into kind of subgroups if we wanted to. And then, of course, we can go back and merge them back together as long as they were of the same parameters. I'm not going to do that right now. In fact, I'm just going to select all of these and just say ignore. So it just sets the action to ignore. Further to that, I'm going to go ahead and select this option here, which is hide ignored groups. So that way we're only looking at the ones that are actually aligned with setup 1 right here. Okay, so the actions come from what we call hole templates. So hole templates, we've created some kind of standard hole templates that are installed with Fusion 360 from the get-go, but you can also create your own hole template. So notice this one here is called My Custom Hole Template. That's a hole template that I've created. And after I get a couple of templates, a couple of operations here in the browser, I'll actually show you how to go about creating a hole template as opposed to just a standard template, because there is a subtle difference between a standard template and a hole template. Okay, so if we take a look at this first 28 holes that we've recognized as a group here, it looks to me like that's just a basic kind of through hole. So we recognize that this matches the signature of my custom hole template, but it also matches the signature of these standard hole templates, which are plain bored, plain ream, and just a plain drilled through. So I'm going to select that plain drilled through. Looks like the same for this one. I'll go ahead and select the plain drilled through. So these ones are blind holes. Notice we've matched that with plain blind. We could match it with plain bored or plain reamed blind as well. We're going to call that a plain blind hole. This one actually is not a hole. So currently this is recognized as a hole, but that has been fixed in our development versions. So to come, this will not be recognized as a hole. So I'm just going to say ignore that one. This one also, again, is not an actual hole, so we'll go ahead and ignore that one. So this is recognizing these little through holes here, these blue ones that you can see there. Again, I'm going to select a plain through on that one. And so this is really pretty representative of exactly the same process that you're going to go through here, just kind of selecting what templates actually match what. So there's a couple of holes here. These are, again, going to be plain through holes. Same for these ones, and same for that one. Okay, so onto the Libraries tab. Currently in the version that I'm using here, which is the commercial version of Fusion 360, you can select from local libraries, the sample libraries, and of course the vendor installed libraries. So the web libraries or cloud-hosted libraries are not available yet. Even if you turn them on, they're not going to show up here. That is again, something that we're working on, and you will have access to your cloud libraries in hole recognition in the future. So I should point out that by default, and even if I uncheck it now, so this uncheck does not persist, and in fact, anything that you check in here does not persist currently. Again, something that we're working on to change. The samples inch and aluminum libraries, inch aluminum and metric aluminum libraries are always selected. So that's fine. I'm not worried about that. I do have a personal library in here, although I'm not going to use it in this case. And then on the options tab, you've got two options, create operations and aligned setups. In this case, we only have one setup, so that option is grayed out. And of course, we want to minimize tool changes. So that does exactly what it says. When it creates the operations, we minimize the tool changes in a way that makes sense. So I'm just going to say OK here. We do give you some information down here as to the fact that hole recognition is doing something. So at this point, it's creating the operations, finding the tools, and there we've created all of the operations necessary to go ahead and create the holes to make all the holes on this part. Okay, so a hole template can be a template that's made up of one or more operations. So in this case, if we look at this hole, for example, I've got a spot drill and a drill operation. So this actually represents a template. So if I wanted to make my own custom template, I could make whatever drilling operations I want from the standard drilling operations in Fusion 360. And of course, they've got to be associated with some cylinders on the model. Once I have those, I can just right click and I can select this option to store as a hole template. The biggest difference between a standard template and a hole template is that we actually store this signature information. So not the diameter or the depth of the hole, just the style of the hole. So in this case, in this particular hole, we've got basically just a single cylinder that does not have a drill point on the bottom. Yes, the preview does because our hole obviously is using a standard 118-degree drill to do that. But the hole itself does not have anything other than a single cylinder on it. So that's what we're actually storing with that hole template, is basically just a cylinder. So if I select this store as a hole template, I'm going to get the option to store this anywhere that I want. So in this case, I'm storing it on my cloud storage under Fusion Hole Templates library that I've created. And the biggest thing is you want to name this something that makes sense to you to reuse in the future, because whatever this name is what's going to show up inside of the hole recognition dialog, and also going to show up if you want to actually create from a template in here. Okay. So that's kind of the basics of what hole recognition does currently. I've got another part over here that has several setups in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through hole recognition on this one, just so that you can get an idea of what happens with several setups. And this one's going to give us a couple of errors that I want to make sure and point out to you. So again, I'm going to turn on the aligned setups and just go through and select everything that's not currently aligned to a setup and just say ignore that and hide those. So now we're down to these. All right. So on the back side, we've got these three holes right here. They match a plain through hole, which is fine. Same thing on the front. we'll say a plain through hole. On the left side, we've got this kind of counterboard blind hole, which is an interesting hole, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we are going to leave that as a counterboard blind. On the right side, we've got a bunch of holes that in our dialog don't match any of our templates, anything either custom that I've created or that's shipped with Fusion 360 or installed with Fusion 360 to begin with. So we can either ignore it, or we can say just create me a simple drilling operation, which means that no templates, just a standard drilling operation in Fusion 360. Now the reason that that didn't match any templates is because these are blind holes, but they were modeled without the 118-degree drill point, so we don't match that with our standard blind template, hole template. So I'm going to say go ahead and create simple drills on those. On the top ones, I've got some counterboard through holes. Again, they match several templates because the counterboard bored through and counterboard and this large counterboard hole are the same signature style. They're just meant for different types of holes. So counterboard through it on that one. These big ones, I'm going to go ahead and select my custom template, this large counterboard hole milling. And on this giant hole here, I'm just going to ignore it because I'm going to come back in later and mill that as though it were kind of a pocket. So I'll go ahead and say OK. One thing I didn't point out was that checkbox that I did point out earlier on the options tab was turned on by default because I had multiple setups in here to align all of my holes to those setups. So I'm going to get this little warning here that says failed to generate toolpaths. The reason I got that is because some of our tool selection stuff is not hooked up yet. Much of it is in development builds, but it's not yet for the commercial releases, which you have access to. So ultimately, you're going to get the red icons here. If you just go and edit that, you're going to see that we're just missing a tool. So you can go in and select whatever tool you think is necessary to go ahead and create those operations. So what types of tools are we not actually selecting yet? Well, certainly milling tools, as you saw here. These are supposed to be circular mills. We're not selecting. In many cases, spot drills and or center drills are not hooked up yet. They are in development builds, but they are not yet in the commercial build. So just know we don't intend to make you always have to select a spot drill or a center drill. We just are still working on, how we can select them appropriately and make sure that we're not, selecting a different size spot drill for every hole, or, selecting a spot drill that's far too small for the size of hole that we're trying to spot, or maybe far too large for the size of hole that we're trying to spot, that sort of thing. So again, in some cases, we're not selecting tools because we just don't have anything in our tool library that matches that. So in this case, it's probably length that's actually stopping us from selecting this tool, because we do have a 9mm tool, which is what this diameter is, but the length of it is shorter than what we'll go through. So rather than selecting a tool that doesn't work, we just don't select a tool and give you the option to come back in and select those. So one other thing that we are working on that is not there yet is the ability to edit one of these hole recognitions. So if I go in today and select edit, I'm just going to get a pop-up as though it was a pattern folder. But the reality is it's not a pattern, and none of this actually does anything right now. So to come, soon is the ability to go back in here and edit, and we'll actually give a hole recognition dialog that persists with what's already in here and gives you the option to either modify the existing operations or keep those existing operations. Obviously, this is also super helpful in the instance that your model changes. You go and change your model, maybe remove some holes, add some holes, change the numbers, the number of holes that are in a group, whatever it may be. that will allow you to then go in and just say edit and update whatever's there currently. So next time you are programming a part with several different types of holes, kind of like we see here, go ahead and give this a try and get us some feedback. Thanks for your help, guys.